I'm not ashamed.
When would the signs spoken of by Jesus in Matthew 24 be fulfilled? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Matthew on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Matthew chapter 24. We're going to be reading from verses 29 to 35. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Matthew chapter 24, beginning at verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, at the doors. Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. In this chapter, we've been discussing the answer to two questions posed by the disciples. When will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? The question was asked in relation to the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple and Christ's second coming. So it is likely that the disciples thought it was only one question. Jesus, however, knew better, and in verses 4 to 35 answered about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, using the rest of the chapter to deal with his second coming. We've thus far completed 3 episodes in this chapter, with 2 more to come following this one. So we invite you to go to eastendchurch.org and search under the Media and W.T.T.B English Podcast tab to listen to the entire chapter before asking questions or leaving comments. In our last episode, we discussed the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, a desolation we showed represented the Roman army which surrounded and destroyed Jerusalem and its temple in 70 A.D. We didn't, however, get the opportunity to discuss verses 27 and 28, so I'd like to quickly reread them and discuss them. Matthew 24, verses 27 and 28. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Jesus has just been warning that many would come and tell them to go and look for Christ here or there, but they weren't to obey them. For when he comes, it will be noticeable like lightning. Nobody will miss it, and the destruction will be powerful. He then tells them that wherever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Eagles gather together to pick the bones of a dead carcass. In this case, Jesus is referencing the Roman armies that would come and destroy Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. So Jesus has said up to this point, there would be plenty of signs that would allow Christians to escape the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. After this time of tribulation, we have the sun being darkened and the stars falling from heaven, figures of speech used in the Bible to represent judgment. Then, verses 30 and 31 says that the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the air. All the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. It is here that many believe Jesus is speaking about his second coming, simply because the phrase coming in the clouds is used, language that is also used for the second coming. But in the Old Testament, God is numerous times pictured as riding on the clouds. In Psalm 68, verse 4, we read, "Sing to God, sing praises to his name, extol him who rides on the clouds, by his name Yah, and rejoice before him." These clouds not only bring rescue, as they do to the elect in Matthew 24:31, because they heeded the words of Jesus, they also bring judgment. In Jeremiah 4:13 we read, "Behold, he shall come up like clouds, and his chariots like the whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. Woe to us, for we are plundered." So just because we read of the Son of Man coming in the clouds doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about the second coming. It could also be talking figuratively about impending judgment. So which is it? The easiest way to understand this is to go back to Matthew 24 and read verse 35. "Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place." The sign Jesus spoke of here would be seen by some in that generation. If it wasn't true, then Jesus is a liar. The only problem we have is when we try to make this sign about Jesus' second coming. It was not. It was a sign for impending judgment and the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple, a sign that was fulfilled in 70 A.D. when Jerusalem and the temple in Jerusalem were destroyed by the Roman armies. If Jesus' followers heeded his warnings and learned from the parable of the fig tree, which taught them to look for the signs that Jesus spoke of, they would be spared. If, however, they didn't heed his words, they would be lost because they would be killed by the Romans. By reading history, we know that all of this happened just like Jesus said it would. For the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D. during the lives of this generation, and not one stone was left upon another. We'll continue with this, the Lord willing, in the next episode. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion in Matthew 24, verses 36 to 44, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his